You're listening to When Love Comes, the podcast, a safe space for single women of faith on a journey of healing, growth, and preparing for the love you deserve. This resource was created with you in mind, so you'll be ready when love comes. Hey, y'all, welcome to another episode of When Love Comes, the podcast. I'm your host, April Nowlin. I am a divorce recovery and relationship coach, and I'm on this crazy journey to help people heal from heartbreak, to create a life that they love, and to prepare for the love they deserve. Now, let me tell y'all something. As a three-time divorcee, I learned a couple things along my healing journey. One, I didn't know what real healing looked like, right? So I got out of these relationships and I would do what everyone was telling me to do, but I wasn't really healed. The other thing that I learned was I didn't know anything about healthy relationships. I didn't know what they look like. I didn't know how to prepare for them. I didn't know how to identify them. And so that's really the point of this resource is I want to provide you guys with something that is going to help you along your journey. So I'm super excited about my guest today. We recently met online, and let me tell y'all something. If y'all think that you have to find guests or connect with people that are local, y'all are wrong. I have met some of the most amazing people that don't even live where I live. So I met her online, and when we connected, I was like, she's amazing. Like, I need to have her on the show. I need to share her story. So I want to welcome Dr. Nicole.
Thank you, April. Listen, the feeling is mutual. You are amazing, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Nicole is a pediatrician, hence doctor, y'all. And she must love kids, being a pediatrician. But she is also a TEDx speaker. She also has a healthcare consulting company. She's also the host of Your Next Chapter podcast, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But she is also this strong, amazing woman with this powerful story that we're going to talk about today. So, Dr. Nicole, I want to start like at the beginning, right? We all get married thinking like this is forever. We get married with these concepts in mind, with idea of what we think marriage is going to be. But share a little bit about your 28-year marriage and maybe what you thought it was going to be and what it was in reality.
Whew. Like you said, 28 years. It's like, how do I unpack 28 years in a few minutes? Well, my ex-husband and I met when I was 17 and he was 18. So we were, little babies.
Mhm.
And at the time, he presented himself to be, I guess, someone who was different from the other guys. The irony, April, I'll kind of skip to the end and then come back. But the irony is that many of the things that he was ultimately revealed to be are aligned with who he was when I met him. But who I thought he was and who he said he was, and early on, were two different things. And so I became enamored with this guy who seemingly changed for me. Like we were young. So I mean, when you're young, it's okay to not be committed. But he was someone who we met at the workplace. It was a part-time job. I was a high school senior, just trying to make some money to help my parents toward my college education that was upcoming. And the kind of rumor that he had, or not the rumor, the reputation was that he had kind of gone through a lot of the young women at the place where we worked. But, so I was kind of putting him off, and he kept trying to, talk to me, get my number. I was like, no, no, no. And then eventually I was worn down. And during our, courtship early on, he really seemed like he was changing or had changed for me. And I think that was like the first mistake I made. If I go all the way back to my 17-year-old self, is they say when people show you who they are, believe them. He had shown me through who he was through other people, but with me, he really did seem like a different person. And because we were young, I was believing that, yeah, you can change. And honestly, April, there was a part of me was like, yeah, I changed him. So that was kind of the start. And, we spent all of our time together. And, at that time, well, we're teenagers. So we're doing things that teenagers do. We're going to the movies, we're going out to eat, all of the things. And eventually we got married. We had two daughters. And I think, there were some signs. Of course, hindsight is 2020. Now, on the other side of the divorce journey, there were definitely some signs really throughout the marriage that this was probably not a healthy relationship. But unfortunately, there was a lot of manipulation that I didn't even understand or appreciate until after I filed for divorce. So there were things that were said and things that were done to really make me believe that the problems in our marriage were because he was working so hard or because he was so busy and trying to build a career and make money and provide for his family. But ultimately, there was a lot of deception and betrayal. And so basically, in April of 2023, when everything kind of came out, that's when I filed for divorce. And so, I think for me, it was like a shattering of this life that I thought I had. Admittedly, this kind of fake picture perfect life. There were things that um, I was unhappy, I would say, for at least the last probably 5 to 10 years of the marriage. I was lonely, and I spent a lot of time praying and begging God and thinking I could fix it and praying for God to fix it instead of just really recognizing, when people want to be home, they're home. When people want to, spend time with you, they spend time with you. And instead of accepting all of the many, many, many excuses that turn out to be lies, I wish that I had just seen it for what it was, and not held on for so long and so tightly, frankly.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So your story, I think, really just hits home, not just for me, but for probably a lot of listeners being in that space of meeting someone and thinking to yourself, well, I can change him. Or, other people telling you. So I've shared this before that there were other people who told me not to marry the men that I married, one of them being his own mother, who was like, he's not ready, like, don't do this. Oh no, but he's good to me and he doesn't do that to me. And, and we're in love, and all these different, stories that we tell ourselves about relationships. So I do have a question. Where did you get your concept of marriage?
Mm. That is something I have been unpacking, April, for 2 years. I guess my first example of marriage would have to have been my parents, who unfortunately divorced when I think they separated when I was 4 and divorced when I was 5. And I don't know if this is trauma or just my own bad memory or maybe a combination of both. But interestingly, I don't have any memories of like a happy, healthy two-parent household. In fact, the only memory I have of my parents and us all being together in the house is an argument that my parents had. And I walked in and literally like took my mom's hand, took my dad's hand, and was like, make up. You all need to make up. That's the only memory. Because my older sisters talk about these vacations that we went on and things that we did as a family. But I have memories of us with mom. I have memories of us with dad, but I have no memories of us together. And so, being like a very high achieving person, I think early on I learned to suck it up and to move past things. And so for years, I mean, for decades, honestly, until very recently, I didn't really appreciate how much my parents' divorce impacted me. I thought, okay, that happened. I was little, I'm fine. But I will say, I definitely had these internal declarations that like that was not going to be me, and that's definitely part of why I held on to my marriage so long, because there's a lot of divorce in my family. And just like I proclaimed I was going to be, I changed my ex-husband. I was like, I'm breaking the mold. I'm not getting the divorce. I'm going to be the one, who stays married. And so I can see how I started to value longevity over quality, and literally, be like, yes, it's been 10 years, oh, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, and not really looking at, okay, but what has gone on in those 25 years. So I
Yes.
would say my parents' unhealthy marriage and subsequent divorce. Both of my older sisters have been divorced. Many other people in my family have been divorced. So that was one aspect. And then I bought into this kind of fairy tale. Despite seeing that, I somehow bought into this fairy tale notion of love and marriage and till death do us part. I also am a Christian, as I know you are too. And so a lot of my thoughts and ideas about marriage were rooted in Christianity. and this ideal that I think is very difficult for many to achieve, especially when God wasn't in it from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think most of what I knew at that time about love and marriage were falsehoods and were like ideals that don't really exist.
Yeah. I asked that question because, and I'm so glad that you talked about what you saw as a child, because so much of what we see as children, and I think I've read that a lot of who you are and things like that are shaped before you're like 6 or 7 years old. It's, what you see, the type of home that you grew up in, and it really shapes our expectations for relationships. So I
Yeah.
grew up with these two scenarios where, one, my mother being an addict and being in abusive relationships. My earliest memories were of going into her room to make sure she was alive. And this is crazy because thinking about the house that we lived in, I had to be in like second grade. Like, it's crazy, right? But then I grew up with my dad and my stepmom, my bonus mom, and it's like they were still two-parent household. But when I was growing up, it wasn't abusive by far, but I wouldn't consider it loving, right? And so
Yeah.
a lot of the relationships I went into, it was almost like I was either overcompensating for what I didn't see. Like, I want this fairy tale, this romance, or it was that thought of, well, I'm not going to have what they had, right? So I'm going to try to fix whoever I'm with to make them into what I want them to be. So you
Yeah.
actually answered one of the questions I was going to ask is why you stayed. Because, like you said, we see these marriages, and a lot of times it's generations before us where it was like grandma and grandpa were married for 75 years, but they were miserable for 70 of them. And we didn't know. And we didn't talk about it, right? And I'm not saying that all the case. Like, my parents at this time have been married for almost 47 years, and they have a very loving relationship. But the things that I saw when I was younger, like, there was one point where they talked about getting divorced, right?
Mm.
So I love that you share, like, this is why I stayed, because that's always that question of, girl, why didn't you leave? There's so many reasons why we don't, right? So,
Yeah, and frankly, April, I was chasing after an illusion, like I kept there were parts of my ex-husband that I truly fell in love with. And in typical relationships like that, you're fighting to kind of get back to where you were, and trying to find that person, who probably never existed, but that person who I thought he was. And then, of course, when you have children, we have two children who are now young adults. But at the time, when you should never stay in a marriage for children, but you're definitely thinking about the impact. And being a child of divorce, I'm thinking about the impact that it would have on my children, not recognizing the impact of staying in an unhealthy relationship and the impact that had on my children. So yeah, there's so many reasons why we stay.
yeah, you hit the nail on the head when you said something about get trying to find the person that you first met. So I remember with my last husband, the person that he was when we were dating, when I say within 30 days of us getting married, within 30 days, he was unrecognizable. And I
Wow.
remember telling myself, well, I just need to help him be the person he was when we dated. I just need to help, right? But
Yeah.
what didn't dawn on me was the person that I was seeing when we were married was who he really was. The person that I
Yes.
saw when we were dating was the facade, right? But that was the person that I fell in love with. That was the person that I connected with. And so for years, I kept chasing this. Well, I just need to help him get back to that person, right? When that really wasn't
Hmm.
who he was. And he was showing me who he was.
Yes.
So I want to talk about kind of that next phase. So you've been through a 28-year marriage, you've got children, you've been through betrayal. What did that initial season look like for you coming out of that marriage?
The word that comes to mind is disorienting, because like I said, while I was unhappy for sure, my unhappiness was largely rooted in his absence, which was explained and explained and explained in ways that, I'd be scratching my head, but then I'm like, okay, well, maybe that makes sense. And then I'd be made to believe that I was a bad person for questioning, the answers that didn't make sense. And so when everything came out, like like skeletons just falling out the closet, it was devastating and it was disorienting because I, in some ways, it was freeing. In many ways, it was freeing because I finally had the answer to the questions that I had been asking for decades, and not getting now at the time. Now I'm like, oh, now I wasn't crazy, like literally some of the direct questions, like, are you cheating on me? No, baby, how could you? Yeah, yes, you were. So it's like I finally had the answers to the questions that I had been asking. And so there was a degree of relief and at the same time just devastation and being disoriented because as more and more and more and more information came out about the depth of his betrayal, it made me question, like, how could I have been in a relationship with someone for, I said we were married 28 years, but we were together for 36 years. So I'm looking at myself like, Nicole, you are this smart, accomplished physician. How in the world did this was all going on, right in front of you? How could you have been with somebody for almost 40 years and not know that they were capable of doing all of these things? And so it was like a complete upheaval in my life. And it caused me to question all of the decisions that I've made. It caused me to question myself, and I had to learn how to trust myself again. I had to learn how to forgive myself. But it was a very, very dark time. But I will say, even in the darkest of those times, April, I knew early on, like within days, I just had this inner knowing in my spirit that one, I was going to be okay. And two, that God was somehow going to use this tragedy for his good. And so I just had to keep holding on to that.
Yeah, I love that, I love your transparency about that season. Many times when we look at people going through breakups, like on social media, particularly in faith-based communities, I was raised in church. I've been on staff at two churches. When you see marriages end, it's almost like grieving is a sin, right? You need to just pray and move on. But
Yeah.
grieving is proof that you loved, right? And so you think about grieving, Jesus wept. Like right when his
Yes.
BFF died, when Lazarus died, knowing that he was going to heal him, raise him from
Yes.
the dead, he still cried, right? And so I love that you shared transparency in that moment. I know that feeling of it's finally over. I remember sitting with my husband as he was telling me how he, shouldn't have got married and he didn't want to be here. And he had actually told me the reason why he married me was because he needed help paying his bills. Like, and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm crying. And as devastated as I was, I heard this small voice say, it's finally over.
Mm.
Because, like you said, for years, and my marriage is only 4 years long, we had been together 6, but for years, I had been, why, what happened? How do we fix this? Are you, and my thing was, I thought that he was struggling with same sex attraction, and we won't dig into that. But I would ask myself, like, is this why you are? Just tell me. And no, it's this. I was getting all these excuses. And like you said, it will be ones that, like, in hindsight, you're like, wait a minute, that don't even make no sense. But you want things to be fixed so bad. You want the pain to end so bad that even some of those lies, you kind of question, like, well, maybe like that could
Yeah.
be it. So I want to talk about the spiritual space you were in. I shared that initially out of my divorce, I was mad at God. I was angry at God. Even though I knew I had some responsibility, I almost felt like, well, this is your fault because you should have stopped this. Like you should have. So what was your spiritual life like in that season?
Whew. I, I definitely had some moments of anger with God. God and I had some very transparent, very real conversations because in my 50s, I have been walking with the Lord for a long time. And so my relationship with him has matured in a way that I know that I can speak to him like I speak to you. So I
Right.
wasn't sugarcoating, I was like, God, like real. I literally one day I was like, really, God? Like, really, God, this is how we're doing this. And initially, honestly, I felt betrayed by God because I have been seeking God for the last couple of years. I mean, actively seeking God for the last couple of years of my marriage. And then I had to understand, wait a minute, like, he gave you exactly what you wanted. And so I would say about 2.5 years, maybe even 3 years before I'm gonna say about 2 years before I filed for divorce. Like I said, I was very unhappy. And it was getting to the point where I was like, this is not sustainable. Even if he's working all the time and he's refusing to stop working all the time, then let it, okay, if it's that, still, like, I'm not happy, my kids aren't happy, like, this is not sustainable. And so I really started praying, but my prayer shifted from all the prayers for all the decades before, when we would have difficulties in our marriage. My prayer was like, God, please fix my marriage. God, please heal my marriage. God, please fix me, fix him. And I just got tired, and I finally had to pray a very vulnerable prayer, which was, let your will be done.
Yeah.
And that was the shift. And it didn't happen immediately, but I think God was waiting for my surrender. And April, when I stopped praying for him to fix this broken, toxic marriage and said, God, let your will be done, things started to shift. And so initially, finally, and then I got brave enough to say, God, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to stay in this marriage, or do you want me to leave? Like, I need to know. Give me a sign. And I didn't feel like I was hearing from God. And so there was like a period of almost 2 years where I was asking and feeling like I wasn't getting the answer. And in the midst of that, when sometimes I would feel like, okay, I think he's telling me to go. And then my ex-husband's behavior would improve. He would be more attentive. That loving person that I once knew was back, and we're going out and we're enjoying each other's company. And I was mistaken that to be God saying, I'm telling you to stay. But when you're in an emotionally manipulative and abusive relationship, which I didn't know at the time, he was sensing me pulling back. And so that's when he would, turn up the heat, like, oh, I
Mhm.
love you so much. So it was, that's just the cycle of abuse, which we don't have to get into that. But the point is, I was mistaking manipulation for God's voice. And so during that time, I met I knew my spiritual life coach, but I started working with her as a spiritual life coach, got deep into God's word, and just really started to really build like a genuine relationship with the Lord. And I had several prayer partners, but there was one prayer partner in particular. And I told her, this was now in 2022, less than a year before I filed. I told her, I don't feel like God is answering me. I'm asking him what to do. I'm not getting an answer. I am frustrated. If he's talking to me, I'm not hearing it. And I told her, I said, I need God to make it obvious. So she prayed with me that God would make it obvious. And April, I'm telling you, within some months, did he not make it? I mean, he revealed things in a way that it was like there was no question. There were no more questions to be answered. And so I say all that to say that a lot of times when we think that God is not with us, it's almost like that, what is it, footsteps
Mhm.
prayer
Footsteps
that they talk
on the
about.
sand.
We
Mhm.
sometimes we think God's not with us. God was with me the whole time. And I also recognize that he knew that I wasn't ready for the truth back when I was first asking him. And so he brought me to my spiritual life coach and strengthened my relationship, and had me in communities of people and women that would later pour into me so that I could be prepared with that information, that was later revealed. So I'm in the best spiritually. I'm in the best place of my life right now. And I'm thankful that God kept me, when, of course, there's a part of me that's still like, God, did you really have to let me go through all of that? Like, couldn't you have shown me this, 5, 10, 15 years ago? But I recognize that it is all being used for his good, and that I needed to be strengthened before I could deal with the aftermath.
Listening to your story, when I say not only just the parallels, but so much truth in how God not only speaks to us, but protects us, right?
Mm,
So I remember there was a season for like 6 months in the last year of my marriage where we weren't sleeping in the same room. And there was one night I asked him, we were coming home from a family function because of, we went to this family function, like everything was okay. And we're coming home and I'm like, hey, are you gonna, sleep in the bed tonight? And he was like, I don't know. What you mean you don't know? It's been 6 months. And then the interesting thing is about 2 weeks after that, he all of a sudden was this brand new person again. He was the person I dated. Let's go out. Let's have sex. Let's do all these. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, he's back.
He's back.
He's back, right? But to your point, that prayer that you prayed, and let me say this, y'all. I am not pro divorce. I've done it 3 times for my own personal reasons. I don't regret any one of them, but I am not pro divorce. I am pro marriage. But I do believe that divorce can be an answered prayer. And like you said, Dr. Nicole, you were praying a prayer and God was already in motion. You just didn't know. And I remember asking God because my husband was the one who initiated the divorce. And I remember asking God, I was like, why did he do it? And God was like, because girl, I was waiting on you to do it. And I kept every time I had that feeling of April, like this, you need to end this. I'd be like, but I don't want to be 3 times divorced, 3 times divorced. I don't want to be embarrassed. I'm on staff at a church. I don't want anyone to know. And, I don't want to go through. And it was all these things. And I felt like God had given me a few opportunities where he was like, all right, you've seen enough. Like, let's go. And I felt like God was saying, look, you didn't do it. So I just pushed him to be like, look, this
Yes.
is over. Okay. So I wanted to talk about that because once again, I think particularly in faith-based communities, we don't talk about the realness of what we go through spiritually when it comes to divorce. And it's okay to be angry with God. He can take it, right? He can take it. And so I want to talk about now you're on this path of recovery. What did your support system look like? Because anyone who's gone through this and truly healed, you can't do it alone. So what did that
Mm-mm.
support look like for you?
I love that you said you can't do it alone because prior to my divorce, unfortunately, I was someone who tried to do most things alone, despite having beautiful family, sisters and a brother and, cousins and sorors and church members and friends. Like I have had a beautiful friend and family network forever. And I just kind of kept things to myself and held my cards close to my chest. And like you said, like this was the thing that was like, oh no, I am done being the strong friend. So for me, support has looked like my family. Most members of my family have been incredibly supportive. My church family has also been incredibly supportive, and I have to highlight that because, like you said, April, this isn't something that's talked about in a lot of churches, and I'm thankful to say that if there was judgment, they kept it to themselves. But the members of my church have been incredibly supportive. My pastor has been so supportive. I mean, prayed some prayers over me that I'm like, I know the Holy Spirit is talking because I didn't even share that with you. And he has allowed me to, speak openly and even share about my podcast during church service. I mentioned my prayer partners and friends. That has been just, I mean, such a huge part of my journey. People have reached out to me. The other thing I learned is I'm still learning how to ask for help, how to accept help. Um, Vulnerability has been a huge part of my healing journey. Sharing on my Facebook page, not sharing all the intimate details about what he did and didn't do, but sharing that I am going through, some challenges and sharing that I'm going through a divorce. And I've had so many people reach out to me, some publicly and many privately, saying like, thank you for sharing. I went through this alone. I wish I had somebody to help me through this. I wish I had talked more about my divorce. Or so it's the healing journey. We were not meant to do any of this alone, and definitely not meant to heal alone. And I'm just so thankful that this journey has taught me how to embrace my village and how to allow others to help me, love me, pour into me in just such beautiful ways.
Yeah, yeah. I have learned the power of community through the healing journey. There's a scripture that I'm sure you've heard growing up, I've heard growing up, but when God tells Adam that it's not good for man to be alone. And I
Mm,
used to hear that scripture so much in the context of marriage, right? That is why it's not good for men to be alone, so you need to get married. But I truly believe that it was much deeper than that. I truly believe that God was telling him, like, you're not meant to do this life alone. And so that is outside of romantic relationships, but that is in your career, in your health, in your finances. Like, find a community. So if you're someone that's listening and you're struggling by yourself, the thing that you probably need is a community to help you heal. So I want to dig into another topic that I know I struggled with. I think a lot of women struggle with it, and even men, but they don't talk about, I think, as much as we do. But going through this process, what were some of the lies that either you may have believed in the beginning about yourself, about marriage? What are some of those thoughts that you had to overcome during this journey?
Hmm. Oh man. I think the lies about marriage for me, well, there's several. One of these I posted on my personal Facebook page probably about 6 months ago. I posted, "Stop normalizing that marriage is hard." Now, I'm not saying marriage is easy, but this idea that is put forth that marriage is hard, marriage is hard, marriage is hard. And so when you are in a hard marriage slash toxic slash unhealthy, it makes you, especially if you're, an overachiever, a high achiever, a perfectionist, it makes you feel like there's something more that you can do to fix it.
Yeah.
And so when things got tough, I'm like, okay, well, marriage is hard. So I can do hard things. I've done a lot of hard things. So I'm just doubling down and buckling up instead of seeing it for what it is and what it was. So I think that we need to stop saying that. We can say marriage takes work because it does, but to say that marriage is hard, I think maybe not for everybody, but for me, it was one of the things that facilitated me just staying and thinking that I could just work harder or pray harder. I think the other lie is that love conquers all. And I'm not being bitter, April, because I
Yeah,
am
no,
healed. I
you're
am still
speaking the
healing, but
truth.
I am healed. And like you, I am not a proponent of divorce. I still believe in love and marriage. I am excited about the possibility that I might get a chance to do this again one day. But yeah, love, this we can be blinded by love. And I guess I should say maybe real love or true love does conquer all. But I think what I've learned, and part of it I think is because of everything I've already shared and the age I was when I entered into this exclusive monogamous relationship that later became my marriage, I didn't even really know what love was. And so I think that the lie is that us believing that, well, if I love him or her enough, that's going to make everything okay. And you talked about it too, this idea of fixing, us believing that we can fix people or change people. And now honestly, I recognize that as arrogance on my part. And I also have come to grips with how I made my marriage and my ex-husband an idol, and we know how God feels about idols. So, me believing that I could somehow be God, I can't fix or change anybody. And if they don't want to fix themselves, or if they don't want to change, if they don't want to be better, then my job moving forward is to bid you farewell. I
Yes.
wish you well, and not to just stay and fix and. So I think those are the biggest lies that I have had to unlearn.
Girl, that is spot on. That is spot on. When we hear, and I've seen books, marriage is hard. And I agree. I think that that statement is so toxic because I think a healthy marriage should not be hard. It should be work, it should be intentional. But you're absolutely right, is that we get into these relationships and we think, oh, it's supposed to be hard. So I just have to try harder to fix things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then love. Oh my gosh. That was something for me because growing up, I never really felt loved, right? Or accepted. And so when I would meet these people who would say, I love you, I would think, oh, that's all it takes. He loves me. And the thing that I've learned, love is a choice. Like you can
Ooh.
choose who you love. There are people that I love that I don't want to be in a relationship with, but I have love for you. And so we use love, I think, as kind of this blanket excuse to almost do whatever we want in a relationship. But what I'm learning is that there's a difference between what the world sees as love and healthy love. And that's why I talk
Yes.
about healthy love because depend upon how you were loved or saw loved or desired love as a child is how you're going to receive love or expect love as an adult. And unfortunately, in most of those cases, that wasn't love. That was manipulation. That was all these different things. So I want to talk about what you've done with your life, right? So I remember going through my third divorce, and I had gone through this, period of depression, where there was a lot of ice cream and fireball. Don't judge me, y'all. And I just remember, kind of feeling like for a moment, this is it, right? And to your point of being high achieving, I had these great jobs. I had built 3 homes. I had traveled to multiple countries. I had done all these things, but this one thing was just like, this is it. This is the end of me. And I remember God saying, like, you have a choice. You have a choice. Like, this can be the end of your story, or you can use this to change not only your life, your daughter's life, and other people around the world's life. So, what is this journey that you're on looks like now? Because I see the work that you're doing, but share with us what is some of the things that you're doing where you're transforming that pain and using it to propel your purpose.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is such a beautiful season of my life. And when I think about where I was a couple of years ago, you mentioned being unrecognizable, or I think you said your ex being unrecognizable. I feel like I'm unrecognizable, but like in a good way. But I'm in a season where God is absolutely did that verse about beauty from ashes. I mean, he is absolutely creating beauty from ashes. And I'm honestly just really blessed and honored to be in the position to be an example for I hate to use the word example, but I'll say be a light. I like light better than example. But I'm really trying to show other women that many of us go through this, and that they're going to be okay, that they should heal in community. I think the biggest mistake that a woman could make when going through divorce or any what I call divine disruption is trying to do it in isolation. And so I'm basically sharing my journey, openly and transparently, in ways that my hope is I'm inviting other women to do the same and creating a safe space and creating a community where they can see themselves in other people. Because a lot of times, we think we're going through something alone, and then you hear somebody else talk about it. Like even you and I, like there's so many similarities. And you're like, oh, this isn't just me, especially as we talked about, there's so much guilt and shame associated with divorce, particularly if you are a high achieving woman who's used to succeeding in all other areas of your life, particularly if you are a Christian woman and you've been told that, God hates divorce, so therefore you mistakenly think that God hates you, which of course is not true. So I have a podcast, as you stated in the intro, Your Next Chapter podcast with Dr. Nicole, where, I am using that platform to share not just my experiences, but the experiences of others. April is on the show coming up. I can't wait for your episode to be released. And I've brought in experts to talk about things like forgiveness and self-worth, and even the financial aspects of divorce. And then in the context of that, because community is so important to me, we are building a community. And so I've had a virtual event. We just had our first in-person event here in Maryland. And I plan on having more events and retreats. And I don't even know what God has in store, but he is showing me that this is like my side business. I have a whole other business, as you talked about, in healthcare, but God is showing me that this business is going to grow and expand. And so I'm just in a season of obedience and expectation. And I'm now much more comfortable because of my divorce. I'm much more comfortable with the unexpected. And so I don't know, where this journey is going to lead me, but I'm so thankful that out of all of that pain and hurt and grief and loss, that I have been blessed to be able to birth something that is going to help others. And as it's helping others, it's helping me.
Yes,
And you may feel this way too. Every
absolutely.
podcast episode, I'm like, okay, this is for my guests, but this is for me. I mean, this is for my
Right.
listener, but this is for me too. Like I'm my own listener. So I continue to heal, and I'm just very, very grateful.
Well, I want to be, if not the first, probably the 100th to say thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing your testimony. I tell people all the time that I got into this work because I wanted to be the resource I didn't have 20 years ago when I went through my first divorce. Like, I wish I had you and your podcast or myself or some of these other resources out there, because I'm like, man. And I remember when God told me at the end of 2019, going to 2020, he was like, I want you to tell your story. And I had so much fear because I was like, wait a minute. A lot of people knew, well, some people knew I had been married one time before because I had a daughter. But a lot of people thought this was my first divorce, maybe my second. But I'm like, God, you want me to tell the world that I've been married 3 times? And the crazy thing about that is that when I started to share my story from a place of healing, I would have women and men reach out and go, I've been waiting for someone like you. Like,
Whew.
thank you. I met a woman about a year ago at a conference that I was at in Baltimore, which I'll be back in November. So we got to connect.
For
Um,
sure.
But I remember telling my testimony, and she said, April, I'm on my second divorce and I'm scared to ask for help because I'm scared of how I'm going to be judged. And she's like, I didn't know that there were tools like this out there to help me. So thank you for the work that you're doing, because I just know that it is changing lives, whether you know it or not. So thank you.
Thank you, April. I appreciate that and know that you are doing the same. I was thrilled to meet you online and now, to do multiple mutual podcast interviews and just to know about the resources that you offer. And like you said, I'm glad that there are people like us and many others in this space to help, because we all need help, and nobody should be trying to navigate this alone. So thank you for this platform and for your transparency and your vulnerability as well.
Thank you. So I got one last question, Dr. Nicole. So we've talked about betrayal, we've talked about heartbreak, we've talked about your healing. You're on this podcast looking all beautiful. So
Thank
tell
you.
me, do you still believe in love? And what is your hope for the future?
Woo! Hot off the presses. No, yes, I do. I do still believe in love for sure. And April, I remember the day after I found out all of the horrific things that my ex-husband had been up to during our marriage. In tears, I prayed to God and I said, God, please don't let this harden my heart. Like, that was my first earnest prayer after finding everything out, because I could understand, like, this is a lot. And this is something that could not only drive me crazy, but that could drive me inside of myself and become one of these bitter women who's like, I ain't never doing that again. All men are dogs. And I just knew I have too much love in my heart to give. So yes, I still believe in love. I still believe in marriage. I don't know that I will get married again. That's something I'm honestly thinking about, but I'm definitely open to it. And 2 years out now from filing, I am in a place where I feel so healed and so healthy. And so yeah, I'm like starting to get ready. Like, what does it look like to date at my age? And so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited about what God has in store for me, and I'm excited about just the exploration.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And thank you again, Dr. Nicole. Like I said, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for all that you're doing. And just thank you for taking your time out of your busy life to spend with me today.
Thank you, April. Thanks for having me.
All right, y'all. So that was another episode. If you enjoyed that, I want you guys to go to whenlovecomes.com and check out all the other voices that I've had. I guarantee you that you will find yourself in someone's story. Like I said, my goal of this podcast is to provide a resource so that women and men have a place where they can learn, what does it really look like to heal from heartbreak? What does that space look like of just creating this life that you love, like Dr. Nicole has? And then I've got couples on there talking about, what did it look like to fall in love again? And so that you guys have the resources so that you're ready when love comes.